just wanted to pop in because I made this video without an intro, and I also wanted to explain the Christmas decorations that you will see in the background. I filmed this video around Christmas time and I didn't know that it wasn't going to be out until like March or whenever this is making its way out, and so you will see Christmas decorations. No, they are not still up. Yay. I just wanted to pop in. Also, you'll see me reach forward and do this a lot. It's because I took notes and I am filming on my MacBook camera because it's the only camera that I have at the moment. You'll see me scrolling through my notes to make sure that I don't ramble on too much. I just did that to help organize my brain and get my thoughts in order in regards to this video. So yeah, I just wanted to pop in and let you know about all that stuff, and now we'll get back to regularly scheduled Miranda. Today I wanted to talk about this book that I read recently called One Day in December by Josie Silver. I wanted to talk about this book because I found myself reading it, and while there were things that I did like about it, there were a lot that I felt very passionately about, and ranting to my mom did not help, so I'm gonna rant to you instead. Okay, after the video Miranda here, to put in a warning, because I totally spaced and forgot to do this, this is a full book review, so I lay out like a whole lot of spoilers. There is a lot of plot points that I do talk through that do spoil pretty much all the book. So if you have not read it and you do want to read it, please do not keep watching, because I'll feel so bad if I ruin it for you. This is the first book that I read by Josie Silver, and I have almost bought The Two Lives of Lydia Bird, I think it's called, at least a handful of times. I've picked it up, read the back, almost gotten it and put it back, and I don't know why. I've just always found a book that I like, that interested me more, but it was always kind of in the back of my mind that I would read it. This book grabbed me immediately from the back cover, and I wanted to read it ASAP, and I did. I came home and I just read it. So the back cover is 2 people, 10 chances, one unforgettable love story. Don't know why I said it like that. Lori is pretty sure love at first sight doesn't exist anywhere but in the movies. But then through a misted up bus window one snowy December day, she sees a man that she knows instantly is the one. Their eyes meet, there's a moment of pure magic, and then her bus drives away. Certain they're fated to find each other again, Lori spends a year scanning every bus stop and cafe in London for him, but doesn't find him, at least not when it matters. Instead, they reunite at a Christmas party when her best friend Sarah giddily introduces her new boyfriend to Lori. It's Jack, the man from the bus. It would be. What follows for Lori, Sarah, and Jack is 10 years of friendship, heartbreak, missed opportunities, roads not taken, and destinies reconsidered. One Day in December is a joyous, heartwarming, and immensely moving love story to escape into, and a reminder that fate takes inexplicable turns along the route to happiness. So let's just say I was hooked, and I stayed hooked until about halfway through the book, and that's when I realized that I was not having fun anymore. And that's just like the best way to put it. The premise itself already gets dicey, balancing a love story between the 2 main characters where one is in a committed relationship to someone else who is the best friend of the other, if that makes sense. It's just already hard, but I thought that like there is a way you could do it. I still believe that. My first bit of unease showed up when Jack is introduced to Lori as her best friend and him as Sarah's boyfriend, and they get introduced and independently just in that moment decide to pretend like they've never seen each other, and this is the first time they're meeting. And in the moment, totally get it, understand, you're overwhelmed, you're in the middle of a party, and you just make a snap decision to just go along with it and pretend like you didn't, have a love at first sight moment a year ago. Totally get it. But they just don't ever talk about it, ever. Like, they just pretend it doesn't happen. So Lori thinks that Jack doesn't remember her, and Jack thinks that Lori forgot about her. And that's that. First off, I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. So then a while later, like years, Jack and Sarah are in a serious relationship, and Lori and Jack kiss one night after going shopping for a Christmas gift for Sarah, and they have dinner and they have a couple drinks, and then they end up kissing, and they just use that as an excuse. They're like, we've had a couple drinks, it didn't mean anything, and that's all they talk about it. They don't talk about it any further, and they don't ever mention it to Sarah. And Jack and Sarah then continue to date for years. So, cheating on its own is already a really difficult thing to incorporate into a story and keep characters likable. And in my opinion, this was not the way to do it because it just further cemented Lori and Jack as two characters that were wishy washy and cowards. Because even if Lori and Jack weren't sure what they meant to each other and how to go forward as a relationship with each other, I think it still showed that Jack was having conflicting feelings, and if he felt tempted at all to kiss Sarah's best friend, he needs to look at that within himself and maybe not be with Sarah for years more. Because that's just, I don't know, it just hit me the wrong way. So Sarah and Jack do eventually break up. Lori and Jack are still like just tiptoeing around each other for no reason. And Lori ends up going to Thailand to find herself, and she meets this guy and gets into a serious relationship with him. He's also from London, where this book is set, and so they return and they keep dating. Jack gets into an accident and he's injured and loses his job, and he just ends up lashing out in anger to anyone who tries to be near him, including Lori, and he just plays the victim card. And I did not like Jack from that moment on. He just pissed me off, to be honest, because he was just too old and previously was shown to be too mature to revert to this type of behavior. Like, I understand you lose your dream job and you get in an accident and your life just isn't turning out how you want. You're going to be upset and you're going to go through a dark time. Totally understand. But Jack was introduced to us as a character with a fair amount of emotional and just general maturity. And then he just reverts. He kisses Lori, even though he's with Sarah, and just like doesn't want to deal with it, which doesn't seem in keeping with who he was for the 2 or so years before that in which we were introduced to him. And so it just So anyways, Jack plays the victim card, and he does this for far too long in the book, and I just didn't like him after that. I didn't root for him at all. Lori then eventually marries the guy that she met in Thailand, even though she knows that she wants to be with Jack. And her husband, who I won't even name because I don't even really care about him, takes a job almost immediately after their honeymoon and travels away from home for long stretches of time. And only later do we find out that he is working with his ex-girlfriend, who his mother openly has said she wants him to be with. And like, his mother does not like Lori at all. The fact that he never mentioned that he was working with his ex-girlfriend, and I think it might even have been ex-fiance now that I think about it. The fact that he never mentioned that, and he says it's because there was nothing going on, didn't even really cross his mind to mention it. But like, as a courtesy, when you take a job and you talk about a job opportunity to your wife, you kind of mention that little detail just so that she's aware of it. And I don't think that Lori would have been like, no, you can't go. And I don't think that like that would have been a thing. And so it's just something that you should mention to your wife. And the fact that he didn't, even though he said it wasn't a big deal, is suspect to me. So that just kind of irked me. Also, I felt like it just annoyed me. So later on, Lori's husband has to stay where he's working, like away from home, and he misses like this important party, and her and Jack end up having a moment where they like slow dance and they're reminiscing about old times and all of this stuff and destiny, and then they ask each other, what if? And they both say that they've thought about what if, and then Lori eventually just goes, well, we could ... only for Jack to go, don't, quote, don't, we're all where we should be. I was angry at this point because even though Lori is miserable in her marriage, her husband's gone for like half the time at least, she's crying and offering to have an affair with the man that she has been in love with and too afraid to do anything about it for years. And Jack is avoiding just like any long-term relationship because he can't imagine committing to anyone but Lori. They're all where they should be. And I was like, you guys are like, I think in your 30s, if not late 20s. Like, this is like teenager things where you're like, I want him, but I feel like I should be with him. And it was just like, Like, they both recognize how bad this is and yet refuse to just either go for it, forsaking all of their previous commitments, or just cut all ties. Because that's the other thing, is there are moments in this book where they talk about the fact, independently or with each other, that maybe they shouldn't be friends anymore because of their feelings for each other. And they both go, but you're too important. I don't want to lose your friendship. And they go, yeah, so we don't have to, like, stop being friends. And I'm like, you're talking about having an affair. Like, I just, what? And so at this point, Lori's felt tempted to cheat on her husband and needs to decide, do I stay with my husband and cut all ties with Jack, or leave my husband to be with Jack? And no, they don't. They don't decide anything. They just continue to pretend like this giant thing is not there, even though they're in each other's lives, and even though her husband has said, like, Jack wants to be with you and I'm uncomfortable with that. And, like, yeah, him with his ex-girlfriend is, like, kind of a double standard, but still. Lori's dad dies suddenly, and then she has, like, this big realization that life is, like, so short and you should be courageous and do all of these things. And then she just does nothing. She has this big epiphany where she realizes that she should have appreciated the time that she had with her family more and told them that she loved them more. And then she doesn't do anything with it. We as the reader witness this, like, monumental shift within her, only for her to do absolutely nothing. And I was like, what am I doing right now reading this? Anyways, the marriage, like, her marriage with her husband begins crumbling. He's spending a lot of time away at work. She's feeling very lonely. Her dad died. She's struggling with that, and her husband can't be there for her the way that she wants because he's working so much. So what do? Decide to try for a baby. At this point, I was done with this book, but I had invested this much time, and I was like, you know what? This is such a dumpster fire, in my opinion, that I want to see it through. I want to see where they're going to go with these characters. And so they decide to have a baby. And this just really, at this point, I was genuinely, this is where I started ranting to myself. Like, I put the book down and I just unleashed about what I had read up until that point and why this was so stupid. Because these characters had arcs in which they went backwards in maturity and decision making, making them not likable at all. And I stopped rooting for them at this point. And it's just, I read books to root for people. Like, even if they're a crappy person to begin with, you want that redemption arc. You want the character to have this growth, this journey. And I felt like the journey for these characters was to go backwards. And, like, that's not enjoyable to watch at all. Why would I root for two incredibly selfish, immature people to be together when they have proven over and over again that they are incapable of being alone and are very codependent? If they're not, like, it's just... And Lori's husband only asked to try for a baby because they both could tell and they both knew that the end of the marriage was near and that they wanted to try and fix it. And how would they fix it? Well, a baby, of course, because babies fix everything. So they try for a baby. Lori only wants to have a baby if her husband will move back to London and get a job in London because she doesn't want to move to where he's at. And he keeps saying that he will. Spoiler, he doesn't. And he actually gets offered a promotion in Brussels where he was working. And he basically tells Lori that he's going, that they're going. He expects her to just go, even though she has said that she wants to stay in London and that's where she wants to be. And she can either go with him or not, is basically what it boils down to. They have like 7 different conversations about this in which he's like, well, you're going to go. And she's like, I'm really not. And he's like, you'll feel different tomorrow. And it's like, but anyways, she doesn't go. They end the marriage. And this is one of the only things that I liked about this book, is I did appreciate their final conversation in which they just mutually decided that the marriage was over. It felt really realistic. It felt what I imagine a conversation in which a marriage ends, in which, like, purely because two people are going in different directions and not because there's this giant blow up or like this big event in which like there's hatred and all of this stuff. It felt very oddly, amidst everything else going on, it felt like a very mature, honest conversation in which they looked at each other and realized that they just weren't compatible. And I liked that. Still hard to cheer them on for that small win, but considering we as a reader were shown in so many different points in time where they shouldn't have gotten married, in the first place and where they knew it, I was like, okay, well, this was just a foregone conclusion. I saw this coming from like 200 pages ago. While I did appreciate the conversation, it was still a bit of a struggle. So my annoyance came back very quickly, however, when Lori gets a divorce, right? And then she just does nothing for over a year. And I get it. A marriage's ending is a big deal. And like there's grief in that. She was trying for a baby. All of these things that I'm glad that she did take some time to actually just be by herself and really process it, sort of. But we literally I was just reading just a year of her life, and intermingled with a year of Jack's life in which he's like sleeping with random girls and like getting in like month-long relationships only for it to get too serious and him to bail. And it's just like I was struggling so hard because she was like so heartbroken over this marriage, which I understand. A marriage ending at all is hard, whether or not you're like emotionally invested in it or not. But like she was not emotionally invested in it from pretty much the get-go. She never really loved her husband, at least not the way she loved Jack. And like their marriage was crumbling pretty much from the moment they got back from the honeymoon and her husband started traveling. Like they pretty much became roommates that had like, it just, there wasn't a lot there. And so the fact that she like really was like, I'm so heartbroken over this, I was like, you offered to cheat on your husband and like you were thinking of Jack at many different points throughout your marriage. And so I'm just like confused as to why, now that you're like free, you don't just actually just go do what you secretly wanted to do this entire time. And instead, we watch a year of your life in which you don't really do anything. And they both just continue to make decisions to pretend that they don't want to be together, even though she believes and has recognized and been shown and had that epiphany that life is too short to not tell people that you love them. So, all of this to say, I read books to root for people. Even if, like I said, they're awful people to begin with, I want an arc. And I don't care if the arc is up and down or if it's just a straight, like, I'm an awful person, now I'm great. Like, I just love seeing people grow and learn from their decisions, whether it's a mistake or not, and how writers choose to take their like characters on a journey and where they see them going. And I understood going into this book that these characters would make bad decisions considering the plot and just the messy web that they found themselves in, but the characters made it so unnecessarily difficult and were so incredibly flawed. I couldn't bring myself to be happy that in the last 3 pages they end up together in a plot point that I have read before in a different book. That was even more upsetting, as I was just like, I've read this ending before in a different book. And that was just like, I read through this book for this, and it was so unsatisfying, and I felt gypped by this book in every way. And I'm so glad that I bought the tiny paperback that's like $9 instead of like the fancy paperback that's like $20. And it's just like, I'm so disappointed, and I feel bad because I'm not trying to just like dump on Josie Silver, because this is the only book that I've read, and like as far as her writing style, I didn't mind. I was able to connect to the characters to a point. It's just her decisions on where she took her characters and the lack of like forward momentum on the character arcs was incredibly disappointing. I think I'm so angry about it is because given her writing style and the talent that I saw in this book, I know that she could have done it differently if she had just put more thought into the actual like character growth and how they would learn from their mistakes. Because it wasn't like at the end of it, we sat back and we're like, oh my gosh, they needed that time to go through, like Lori needed to go through that marriage and learn the lessons within that marriage so that she could grow to a point where she was the person that she needed to be with Jack. And Jack went through a similar situation with his accident or with the women that he dated, in which he grew from those relationships and learned things that allowed him to be ready for a connection as strong as what him and Lori have. That I would have understood, but it wasn't written in that way. It was written in a way that these two characters are just floating around in life, not knowing what they're doing or how their decisions are affecting other people, and yet having these brief moments of intense clarity in which they are seeing exactly what they're doing and how it's affecting other people and deciding not to do anything about it. if that made sense. So it just, like, the premise had extreme potential to be this grand love story filled with twists and heartache and, like, learning and taking time to get to a point where they are together. Like, I didn't expect them to be together, like, a year after he dates the roommate. Like, I didn't expect it to happen halfway through the book. I just felt like all the ways that it could have gone right, it went wrong. And at the end of the day, they spent, I mean, on the back it says 10 years, but I'll give them the year after the bus stop in which they didn't even know about each other. They spent 8 years waking up every day and deciding to ignore their feelings for each other, instead relying on other people for validation and getting into relationships they had no intention of fully committing to, marriage or no, unnecessarily hurting those around them in their cowardice. Like, Lori's husband was very selfish and very career driven, but I fully believe that he did love her to the best of his ability. And, like, he had moments where he was kind of stupid, but he had moments where he defended Lori to his mother and stood up to his mother and said, this is the woman I'm going to marry. I want to marry her. Deal with it. And I respected him for that. And I felt guilty knowing that Lori just, like, was marrying him because she thought that's what she should do. And, like, that's just, like, a giant slap in the face to me. Life is indeed too short to pull the bull that they pulled. And sit and play the why me game, wondering why your life didn't turn out how you wanted when you didn't do anything to change it. And I'm upset because this premise is so good. Like, the first chapter was great. I was in. And it was so enticing. And then it just went either nowhere or, like, downhill. And a lot of time was spent on the timeline and the conversations and everything in here except it felt like the character arcs, which is, like, the most important thing, especially if you have such a messy, like, dynamic in this. Like, you have to develop these characters and develop their integrity so that we as the reader root for them and want them to be together. Because at the end of it, I didn't want them to be together. I was like, they're so incredibly toxic on their own. Imagine them together. It's gonna be just this giant, giant mess. And it's just like, I felt like at the end of it, not only had Lori and Jack not learned a damn thing from their relationships outside of each other, but they also had lost a lot of what made them good people at the beginning. Like, Jack, when he was introduced, yeah, the whole, like, roommates, boyfriend situation was rough, but, like, Jack as a character on its own, he felt very good. It felt like a good character, and I felt like that was it. That was our quick snapshot of how he could be a good person. And then for the rest of the book, it was all the ways that he could easily be a selfish and manipulative and just a horrible person. And the same with Lori. She was vibrant and youthful and fun and charismatic. And we got a snapshot of that. And then we got how she could be just a coward and fearful and just, like, so timid. And I'm like, woman, wake up. Don't marry this dude because you know you don't want to. Like, it's just, I was just very disappointed, and rarely, if ever, have I ever been so genuinely upset by a book. And again, I think it's because I see the writing talent of Josie Silver in here. If I step away from, like, my upset, I still can recognize that this was a well-written book in the sense of, like, style. It's just the character arcs that were so, and that's what's frustrating, is I do think that she did think about it, and I think that this is what she wanted to do with the characters, and I just want to know why. Because I think that as an author, you get so caught up in the fact that you love your characters, they're like your children, and I think that you very much see them through your eyes like a parent sees a child almost, that you forget that you are trying to write for the masses to read and feel what you already naturally feel for these characters, that other people aren't going to naturally feel. You have to introduce them and bring those traits that you love so much into the story, and not just have it be, well, I know this, so they'll know this, if that made sense. So yeah, it was just, it was a roller coaster, and it was frustrating and infuriating, and I am hesitant to read more written by Josie Silver. I think I will, because I'm curious if it was just this book, particularly that I did not gel with at all. So I think I will read another book by her, but it will definitely be, I won't be expecting as much as I expected from this book, because I expected a great love story, and I don't feel like I got that. And so, anyways, that's my rant. If you listen to this entire thing, I appreciate you. And if you agree with me, let me know. And if you read it on your own and had a completely different experience, let me know that too, because it was just hard. It was just a hard thing. So yeah, thank you for watching.